guess the thing our family has benefited from is we never think that attending a school timetable is the most important thing. The most important thing in our family's life
Yeah.
is caring for the other members of the family. And at various times, somebody in the family will need more care.
Hi, moms. Welcome to Christian Homeschool Mom Podcast. I'm so glad you're here today. I'm your host, Eve Owens. I'm a wife to James. I'm a mom to 5 amazing children, and I'm a woman that needs God's grace every day. And this is a space where we can come together to encourage, equip, and empower fellow moms who are raising godly children in this ungodly world. Whether you're a parent, a homeschooling mom, or someone seeking inspiration, we hope our experiences resonate with you. We invite you to listen in, reflect on your own story, and perhaps you'll find some encouragement today. We'll dive into practical tips, inspiring stories, and biblical wisdom to help you navigate this beautiful, challenging, and rewarding path. So grab your tea, your coffee, or a glass of water, sit back, and let's grow together in faith. So, welcome back to this podcast. Today, I have a lovely guest. She's a pioneer in home education here in Ireland. That's what I would say, for me anyway. And she's a widowed mother of 6 home educated children. So, the age would be from 17 to 38. And she lives in County Carlow. So, I have here Monica O'Connor. Thanks a million for joining me today.
Thanks so
Wow.
much for
Thanks,
the
Monica. Pleasure is
invitation. It's
mine.
lovely to.
Would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners today as well, please?
Sure. I am 58 years of age. I live now near my late husband's family, near Tullow in Carlow. I was born in Australia, though I was in Australia till and then my father and mother brought us back to the farm in rural County Wexford, where he grew up. So, yeah, I had a very conventional schooling myself. My parents thought the more education you got, the better. And in their minds, I think education equaled certified education, which
Mhm.
I think the landscape has changed. So I was born in 1967 and I had my first baby in 1986. So I was a mum at 19 years of age. And I was very blessed in the first year of my first son's life to meet a family who were English South African living in rural County Kilkenny. And they told me that the Irish Constitution protects explicitly the right of Irish families to home educate. And that kind of blew my mind because I had attended school and gotten good results and still didn't know that it was wanted. And that
Lovely.
began a
Thanks
journey
for
for our
sharing
family.
that. So, after you have known that, what made you, why did you decide to homeschool your children then instead of sending them to the public school or private school?
I suppose when my first son was born, I
Yeah.
thought that 4 was too young to send anybody. I laugh at that now because the younger 4
Yeah.
children haven't gone to institutions until they were 16. It was
Yeah.
very young, and I thought, oh, I'd leave him till 5 anyway, and he's a November birthday, so it might be 5.5, we'll say. And but I was just so blessed to meet this family, and they loaned me their Holt books. So for those who don't know, John Holt was a public school teacher in Boston. He died in 1985, but he questioned the education system and whether it served the needs of children. And he wrote an amazing number of books called How Children Learn, How Children Fail, The Underachieving School, Learning All the Time, which is a very interesting book. And he starts talking about how he, as an older man in his 40s and 50s, began learning an instrument, a musical instrument. And that's very relevant for my
Hmm.
family because most of my children are musicians. But I just, uh, reading the books of John Holt and watching a family, the children
Yeah.
were 8 and 10, the older children in this family, and seeing children learn without school. And the model I had, the example I had when I started home educating or thinking about homing was a family who had a small fencing contractor business. They had a sheep farm. The mum and dad both worked at home. There were 3 children and then eventually a 4th. I
Yeah.
was there to help provide childcare for the 3rd child. Year-olds would maybe do a little bit of bookwork in the morning after their chores were done. And then there would be a family after lunch. The mum or dad would read Watership Down, a chapter to the family. And I loved the idea that
Yes.
learning could take place within the home, within the family. There was no need to send a child away to force them to learn anything. And the more I looked into it, the more I discovered, and the longer I was a mother and the more children I had, the more I realized that children want to learn all the time. And we as adults don't need to force, coerce, punish, or reward. Children learn because they love learning. And we just
And
have
like
to
what you
provide
said
the right
there, we just
environment.
have to provide the right environment because they do love learning. I think it's like an instinct to them to really like wanting to know what, even like a small child, my 2-year-old, like say you turn on a washing machine, he's checking what's in there and trying to press buttons. You know what I mean? Either a dishwasher. So you just have to kind of like guide them. And sometimes he's the one who presses the
Yeah.
start button. So from that age, they already start kind of like look at things and see how these things work and try things out. So I like what you said, that we just have to provide them the right environment. I think it became like a thing that you need to go to school. You need to go to school to learn, you know?
I understand it as being, yeah, sorry for interrupting. I
Yeah.
understand it as being historical, that we started industrial type of
Mhm.
education, and I do see it as an industry now. And my late husband was a secondary school teacher, and the longer he taught, the more he thought that teaching was damaging, the more he was grateful that we were choosing home education, particularly for younger
Yeah.
age children. Um, so I see that industrial type schooling took over at a time possibly when not everybody was literate, possibly when so busy just trying to earn enough money that the children needed to be somewhere safe. Um, and it's interesting if that was what was happening for, we'll say, my grandmothers were born in 9 and in 1906. And so they were small children. Um, schooling wasn't,
Yeah.
schooling was seen as a privilege, actually. It wasn't something that was readily available to children, no matter where they lived. Um, and now schooling has become very coercive. It has an industrial model. Some of the people whom I have heard speak at various home education conferences over would say that, if we need factory workers, then it's good that we have children who are used to the idea that a bell starts and ends your day and tells you where to be. Because if you look into the origins of the institution of education, when that wasn't directed to the higher aim of why are we humans? Why are we? Do you know what I mean? And I would imagine that most of the people watching your podcast, Evelyn, would believe that we are here to, as
Yeah.
parents anyway, as mums, to love our children onto their feet, to love them independent, so they can be independent contributors, so
Yes.
that they can find their God-given talents, so that they can bring
Yes.
their souls to the next life.
Yeah.
That's what I think the aim of mothering is. And for me, there is no difference between mothering my children and being at home with them as a home educator. I never describe myself now, after 38 years. My eldest son is 38 and my youngest is 17 and about to go to university this year. I never describe myself as my children's teacher. I am just there. Do you know what I mean? The most I have provided is given birth to them.
Yeah.
They've watched me breastfeed their siblings. We've had home births, so they realize that, you know, babies are
Yes.
human before they're born and are sacred little
Yes.
individuals that we need
Yes.
to make space in our homes for them. We need to make space in our family. We
Yes.
need to mostly make space in our heart. So
Yes.
I definitely see it as a mission. I see being my
Yes.
children's mother as my vocation, and then the education piece just is a natural follow on from breastfeeding them and them starting to eat a bit of carrot or banana when they're
Yeah.
6 or 7 or 8 or 9 months old. and then eventually moving out of mommy and daddy's bed, eventually going and sleeping in a room with their siblings. I don't see independence as something we have to force children into. I see children as desperately, like your 2-year-old pushing the buttons on the washing machine, most of the washing
Yeah.
machine. So I want to be able to do this. And if I have taught my children anything, it is how to prepare their own food, prepare food for the whole family, and be responsible for their own laundry from the age of 10, actually, in our house, because 2-year-olds love matching socks, you know. And my biggest tip to any woman is don't iron. Ironing is the biggest waste of electricity and women's time invented by humanity. And
I know I understand your point there, but we as a mom, we are the nurturer. It's even laundry that they will be doing until they get out of our house and have. So those are basic skills. I'll be honest with you. I was never homeschooled myself. I went to the normal scene of going to public school, to private school until I got my degree and hoping that because I have my degree, I will get a proper job. You know what I mean? A better job because I have a degree. So, but that all changed to me now. But because it's different, that's the way how I grew up. I'm from the Philippines originally, Monica. And it's kind of like we were taught that that's how it should be, that you go to school so you can have a better job when you actually get there, because of the competition. So you make sure you get a job. So you make sure you go to school. So my husband told me to homeschool my children. I was like, I know. I don't know how to do that. You know what I mean? And when he told me, you have to stop working. And I was working in accounts in Boltsbridge at that time. And I'm kind of like, why would so we have loads of conversations. So it took me a while to say yes to God. I have to ask the Lord to change me, to change my heart. And that's one of my testimony here in this podcast because if it was me before, I wouldn't want to do it because I was never homeschooled. I have no clue. I don't know how to do it. I wouldn't even know the curriculum compared to the Philippines that I've used to Irish curriculum. So I'm like, when someone told me, is your children like in junior and senior, kind of like, what is that about? I have no clue on all of that. So you're kind of like learning, oh, okay, so that's how they call when the age is like this and that.
yes, and it's one thing that my children have coped with differently along the years. So some of them will just automatically translate their ages on the basis of what they know of their cousins'
Mhm.
lives who have all been sent to school. And so they would know that if you are 5, you're meant to possibly be in senior infants. And if you're 7, you're meant to be in first or second class. And they would just automatically, and, yeah, I'm in transition year if he had a medical appointment or something like that, because my son has hemophilia, my youngest. And that was a very important part of our family's education, even though he's the youngest. I'm so grateful he was the youngest
Mhm.
because it meant a lot of hospital overnights with him. And I would have found that difficult to manage. Not teaching because I don't teach my children and we don't use the curriculum. We are very firmly unschoolers. Now, the older 3 boys who are 38, men who are 38, 31, and 30, and they now live in Montana and in London, and they would say that education or my version of home education became more unschooling and became
Yeah.
more relaxed as we had more children. And as I realized it worked, and they would feel sometimes a little aggrieved as any older child. I'm the
Yeah.
eldest. My late husband was the eldest. I've always said to the older 2 children in our house, your parents are only experimenting on the
I
first 2.
know. Yeah.
Do you know? And, and when some of my children might say to me, it's so unfair that the younger children get a nicer, easier, better life than they did. And they might think that that's unfair. And so I have, in my own head, come up with the notion that, I was a mother at 19 and I gave birth to my last baby at 40. So was fairness to be that I would, as a teenage mum, treat a
Y-
child exactly as I would of someone with 2 decades of
Yeah.
parenting experience at that point? Was that to be fair? Do you know that I wouldn't have learnt anything? Did you want me to
Yeah.
learn
Yeah.
nothing
Yeah.
from my mistakes? Because in our house, we think mistakes are great.
Yes.
Mistakes are sent to teach us things. Mistakes are not something to get a red mark about. Mistakes are not
Yes.
something to feel a failure over. You learn
Yes.
from your mistakes. If
Mhm.
you are able to be humble enough, and if there's one thing I would say to every mother is be humble enough to apologize to your children when you lose your temper, because unless you're a saint, and I
Yeah.
don't really know any,
Yeah.
you will lose your temper because there will be days when there's too much going on, particularly if you've got family illness, particularly when children are at different stages, particularly when one child really wants you to drive them to swimming or to soccer or to some other activity, and the baby is
Mhm.
sick or someone in the house has
Yeah.
fallen and hurt themselves, and you've got to deal with a medical emergency now instead of some extra cultural activity that some young person wanted, or they want to go and visit their friends and you just are too tired because you're pregnant or you've just given birth or the baby's been up teething and you can't drive them to the bus to meet their friend or to the park. Do you know, we all need, as human beings, in a family together that God has gifted us with,
Yes.
to extend grace and kindness and mercy to each other, but to be able to turn around as the adult and say, I don't know it all. I mess up.
I totally agree with that, Monica, because parents, as like what you said there, of course, there's wisdom that you gain through the 2 decades of parenting. So the same thing, my daughter, when we were like talking now, I said like, sorry, you were the guinea pig because we were trying to see how it's gonna work. Yeah, mom, I'm your guinea pig. So, but then it's kind of like we're laughing at now,
Yes.
but say like, well, we never knew how to do it, so we're learning things. It's easier as you get longer in this race. Every family is different as well. It's kind of like you can't compare yourself to other family because every family is different. Every child is unique. God didn't make them like a big cutter. This is how everyone is gonna be like. So everyone is also unique. So that's something that as parents, I believe we also need to discover what's the strength of our children, what's their gift, and we can support them on that too.
No, I said, I was going to say, you're so right about that. But I think that the one thing, um, if people ask me what my reason now is, so I came from Australia and was pretty horribly bullied for the first year of primary school and then for the first year of secondary school. So socially, I found school challenging, whereas academically, I thrived. But that wasn't my reason for deciding that school wasn't the best option for my children. It wasn't to prevent them being bullied, because you can't prevent your
Mhm.
children being bullied. And in sports situations and in other situations, we are starting to meet people who, for whatever reason, are not able to behave kindly.
Yeah.
Um, but I think it's really important that so if people want, I'm very much into one page, one paragraph, one line, one word. So if there's one word for why I home educate, I would say time. So my gift to my children has been my time, and my gift to them has been their time. Time to discover what it is their talents are and what God might be nudging towards. And I also think that with your younger children, when you have someone who's a teenager and or even younger than that, children learn by imitation. They learn by our first children learn by their parents, and then if they're blessed with siblings, the younger siblings learn from watching the older children. And my son, who's now 30, and his brother is 20 months older than him. So that would have been the youngest to read. I would not say I taught anybody to read. I had lots of um, resources around the house. Reading was very prized in our home. Every time you saw me sitting breastfeeding a baby, I had a homebirth newsletter, a breastfeeding newsletter, a home education book, or a novel, or a letter from, family members. I was always reading something. My children kind of saw me with a book in front of my
Yes.
face a lot of the time. And so reading was prized. And I just trusted that every child would eventually learn to read. The one read at 6, his birthday is November. And I know he was in the back of the car reading the Little Red Hen book to his brother. And that was March because we were going to a breastfeeding conference. So I know exactly. I don't know everything exactly about all of
Yeah.
the children, but he was 6 years and 4 months and he was reading. And one of the children didn't learn to read until he was 10 years old and 2 months. There is no difference now between the read or comprehension of those children. I would suggest that if the one who didn't read till the age of 10 had been in school, that child might have been labelled dyslexic or been given resource hours or built that problem. Because if you are dealing with 24 or 32 children in a class and you can't keep everybody on page 14 of the book, because that's what we're doing today, then everybody not reading fluently by 7 is a problem. But in a home education system, we were able to allow anybody to read. So the first read at 8 and a bit, bribed by his grandmother, by the way, because I was
Yeah.
trying to wait until he was ready to read. So the youngest was 6 and 4 months, and the oldest was 10 and 3 months. And they all read for pleasure. They all think that books are cool. And any teacher, boys, will tell you that encouraging teenage lads to read is one of the most difficult things you will do. And I also, we changed our attitude to technology because scared of it would have been Game
Yeah.
Boys and it would have been that kind of thing. And so I would have become
Mhm.
within limits that are determined basically by the parents deciding what access, how much access to what kind of websites it's now become. I mean, our children still remember our first computer,
Yeah.
and you had to unplug the phone line to plug it in. Like we tell the older children, the older 3 children who are 30, 31, 38 will tell this story to the
Yeah.
17-year-old.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you're talking about the cave days. Do you know what I mean? If you believe in that. You know what I mean? Like talking about primitive Neanderthals or
Yes.
whatever. Do you know that this is what it used to happen? But now
Right.
information is so widely available. Like for my older children, we went to the library, we borrowed books. If my young people were interested in something that myself and knew nothing about, we would try to find somebody who could talk to them or show it to them, try to look up try to look up, it would have been VHS
Yes.
videos, try to look up, documentaries, try to borrow
Yeah.
tapes, VHS tapes from the library. We spent a winter where we all watched David Attenborough's Life in the Freezer. But that was
Yes.
like 3 babies ago. That was only the first 3 children. Now, as I say to them, everybody, just about,
Right.
of a certain age, has a supercomputer in their pocket. You don't now have to ask, what's the definition of a spider? How many legs does a dragonfly have?
Yes.
That kind of thing. You can look up all that information so quickly. The problem now is not a lack of information.
Mhm.
The problem is a lack of discernment. What
Yes.
information is important for our children in August 2025? What do we need to know? And I would suggest that self-care skills, how to cook for yourself, how to manage your own laundry, how to sew a button. If there's one thing I want my sons particularly, and their future wives possibly, to remember me for, it's that they know how to sew on a button. If I've done nothing else, that they can make bread,
Yes.
they know how to peel potatoes, they know how to put a meal on the table, from ingredients that are easily available, that it's not just all fast food. And I'm not knocking fast food, I understand that. And, some
Yeah.
of my children work in the hospitality industry and they
Yes.
make coffee and they make buns for people and they work in bars and that kind of thing. Because if you're a musician, you're going to have to make coffee
Yes.
and pour pints to fund yourself. But
Yes.
what our children got was the gift of time to be bored, which wasn't my job to fill their hours. It was their job to find something useful and
I
hopefully
love what you
from
said
something that
that,
they love.
that the give of time, because you can't bring the time back. Those time back when they were small and you were training there. You were training them, either it is skills, how to cook, how to bake, how to peel potatoes. There was one time, Monica, I was sick and my husband wasn't well either, but my body, I think because lots of things going on, that my body kind of like just needed rest. So I became sick as well. So me and my husband were both sick. And my daughter at that time, she just turned 14. And she's the one, I was so proud of her because I can't cook. I was in bed. And she's the one who made the dinner for us. She made roast chicken. She boiled the potatoes. There's carrots. You know what I mean? There's carrots there. There's
Wow.
broccoli. She even made the gravy. She just said, "Mommy, I'm
Yeah.
just not sure really how to make the stuffing, but I have the gravy for the chicken." And I was kind of like, "You did all of that?" "Yeah, Mom." And I was like, because that's the first she made everything. I mean, she will be cooking veg, but I
Well,
will be doing the meat. But then to prepare the whole meal
yeah,
with gravy,
yeah.
I was like, wow, fantastic. I was so proud of her doing that.
You didn't know
Yeah,
she
I didn't know that she
you
can
didn't know
make it
she had
all
those
like,
skills,
yeah,
and that's so important, and I know that yeah, yeah. For one of my children, I'd planned a home birth and ended up having a cesarean and being in hospital for 10 days and being quite ill. So I came home unable to do very much except just
yeah,
feed, keep the new baby alive. And I was, finding things difficult and trying to use cloth nappies and things like that. And it was my 7-year-old who we discovered could make a pot of tea, could make scrambled eggs, could cook rashers and make toast and keep me
yes,
fed. And that was such a blessing, do you know? But there are so many people now who will not trust a 7-year-old to do things in the kitchen. And I suppose I was blessed in that I'd heard about Maria Montessori, Dr. Maria Montessori. And her story is fascinating. She was the very first woman to become a medical doctor in Italy. And because it was considered unseemly to have a woman do dissections with the male students, he had to wait till all the men had gone home and she had to do the dissections on her own in the early 1900s with gas lighting on the walls. I mean, they really tried to constructively
yeah,
dismiss her,
yeah,
you would call it now. Do you know what I mean? They really tried to freak her out so much that she would leave. She didn't leave, but served small children. And she said, children want to be like us. And so she came up with in a Montessori Casa de Bambini children's house, you will have exercises of practical life. So the basic thing is that our chairs and our tables are not made for children. Our cups and our spoons and so she would have everything child sized, and 4-year-olds could sweep the
yes,
floor really well because they want to. They actually want to do it. Nobody needs to give them a gold star or a pat on the head or tell them good boy or good girl. None of that. Children like to imitate adults and they like to do real work. She said children don't need toys. Um, and in her home, in system, what she had was 4-year-olds pouring, first of all, beads from one jug, glass jug, to the next, and then pouring coloured liquid, and then not spilling a drop, and then clear liquid. And then in her homes, you would have 4-year-olds serving hot soup to each other at lunchtime, and nobody got burnt, and nobody, because they had developed the skill. And she said, what is lacking is not that
yeah,
children don't have the ability and don't need to be coerced to do any of this. What they need is for us is to back what we said
yes,
earlier, to prepare the environment. So in the Montessori system or belief system, it is about preparing the environment so that a child can sit comfortably with their feet on the floor because then they won't fidget. Where as much as a child, you know what I mean? And she was very much into
yeah,
prayer and meditation for children. She said children have the idea of circle time that a lot of children have in play school now. A lot of that comes from the Montessori idea that 4-year-olds will sit and pray
mhm,
if they are encouraged to do so,
yeah,
if they watch us doing that. But they
that is
want to
so
do
true.
whatever the parents do.
Whether we like it or not, our children, they look up to us. So they kind of like copy us. So either we're going to be a model to them in a good way, or we're going to be a model to them in a bad way. You know what I mean? So are we going to be, when I'm saying good way, yeah, so are we going to be teaching
Absolutely.
them about what life is about, So, and like what you said, my reason why I homeschool, because I want them to grow, not just to grow physically, that I will feed them and nurture them, but I want to also nurture their spiritual need. I want them to know that the God that made them has a purpose in their lives. So I want as well to teach them that there's a God that created them and He has a purpose in their lives. So I am here to encourage them, to kind of like help them to find out what is God's purpose, what's God's plan. And through God's word, we can find what is God's plan for us. So I can teach them the word of God like I am being taught in the Bible to teach my children the ways of the Lord. Because if we're not going to teach them the ways of the Lord, someone else is going to teach them the ways of the world, you know? So to me, that's my thing. I want my children to know that there's a God that created them and he has a plan for them and they are wonderfully made in the image of God. God is it's not a mistake they are here. There's a purpose why they are here. So we can grow knowing what that purpose of God,
Yeah.
for each one. I just want to ask you, because you already shared a lot of stuff here, Monica. But I want to ask you, looking back, I know you still have a 17-year-old, but looking back, what was the most rewarding part of home education for you?
I think it's that whenever the unexpected challenges came to our family, when my last baby, who is
Yeah.
17 now, when he was 6 months old, we were suddenly out of the blue told he has a genetic clotting disorder called hemophilia. And I was so blessedly ignorant, Evelyn. I can't describe to you how all I
I don't even
knew
know what that
about
is.
hemophilia
Sorry.
was SARS of Russia, and bleeding to death. That was all I knew. And
Wow, must
and
be,
I was
yeah.
terrified. And I was very blessed because I suppose we had a culture of going to La Leche League for breastfeeding help, Home Birth
Yeah.
Association for having home births, Home Education Network for being unusual about our educational choices. So we already knew that we were
Mhm.
very niche in what we were doing. But hemophilia then put us into a group, which at the time, there was only, when Eamon was diagnosed in 2009, there were only about 500 children and adults with us in Ireland. We're
Mhm.
a very small community. And um, and I thought it had to be a genetic condition. When I asked the GP to explain why my almost 6 month old was having unexplained bruising, he said, oh, it couldn't be hemophilia because your father would have to have it. Because the way hemophilia works is men have it, girls 50-50%
Mhm.
of the time will be carriers, and then a grandson of a carrier daughter will have hemophilia. So we learnt all this real
Yes.
life stuff about biology, and we waited for the first joint bleed. So basically, for most children with blood clotting disorders, it's not what I feared, that if you accidentally cut their finger when you're fingernails, that they can't clot and they will
Yeah.
bleed to death.
Mhm.
That's what I believed from the historical stuff of the Russian royal family. Um, so that's not the case for Eamon's severe hemophilia. He would bleed into a joint, an ankle joint or a knee joint, predominantly for him. And we had to spend a lot of time going to hospital appointments, which was obviously
Yeah.
very disruptive of family life. But what the thing, sorry, this is a
Oh, you're
long-winded
grand.
answer, as all my answers will be. Um, what the strength of thanks, the strength of home education was that it meant everybody
Yes.
realized what the most important thing was, and that whoever's the vulnerable person. So sometimes the vulnerable person is mum because she's 8 months pregnant and she's exhausted, or she's 2 weeks postpartum and she's exhausted, or breathing, mum is still exhausted. Sometimes that's the most important person in the
Yeah.
house to nurture. You notice I said mum a lot. Sometimes it's dad played soccer for his uncle's team and broke his leg when the baby was 2 weeks old. And then it's mum and dad fighting for who is most exhausted
Yeah.
and needs most care. But I guess the thing our family has benefited from is we never think that attending a school timetable is the most important thing. The most important thing in our family's life is
Yeah.
caring for the other members of the family. And at various times, somebody in the family will need more care. And what it showed me was at times we fostered children, and that was very disruptive for our own family. But again, we learned that some people who can't live with their own mommy and
Yeah.
daddy need a lot of care, and they need time to understand how your family works. And the most shocking thing for most children of the 22 we fostered was that there's always food in the house.
Yeah.
Thank God there was always food in the house. But you know what I mean? They were shocked. Like when we did our fostering training, children would say to other people's children, to the children of the parents who were foster carers, would say, do you get a dinner like this every day? Because they were used to whatever up by Tuesday, if Thursday is the day when a social welfare payment is
Yeah.
made, or a person um, in low earning employment is paid. There will be days of the week when you will be hungry. That's what every foster child. So we were blessed in that we bought our first house in 1994, and we were able to sell it then and buy some land and build a large home. And we always said that it was
Yeah.
important that our children would learn to share. Now, you can say to your son or daughter, I would like you to share with your little brother or sister, and the little brother or sister could be absolutely wrecking their head. And you know that if they share the Lego or the book or the pencils or the particular crayons or paint, that the small person's going to wreck it.
Yeah.
That is sometimes what happens. Not every small child is able to be careful with an older sibling's equipment or possessions. That's life. And we come back to that we all need to apologize to each other, and we all need to try and make things better. But the point is that when somebody's vulnerable, when somebody's hurting, when someone's sad, so that might have been my 6-month-old when he was getting a lot of needle blood tests and things at the time of his diagnosis. So he might have needed more help. I was absolutely up the walls trying to learn about this new condition. And then to have the absolute kind of bedoing moment where I'm told that I'm actually a carrier of the gene, even though it's not in my family anywhere, and that my 4 older sons all had a 50-50 chance
Thanks be
of
to
having
God,
it
yeah.
and don't, thank God. And my daughter had a 50-50 chance of being a
Amen.
carrier and isn't, thank God. So it's just literally myself and my son who have this. Yeah, amen. Who have this. And so it's how do we care for somebody vulnerable? How do we care for someone who's going through something? And then when we had other issues, like my parents became vulnerable in terms of their health. My dad had fluid on the brain and he would come and stay with us. My sister took care of him for 4 years, but he would come and stay with us for 1 weekend a month when he was able, when we had a room that we could accommodate him, because after a while he wasn't able to get up the stairs. And then when my mother was elder, she just came from hospital and stayed in our house for 4 months until she died. Lord have mercy on her soul. It's 3 years ago on Friday that my mum's anniversary is. But I would say when I was taking care of my mum, because she wanted help to get to the bathroom 16 times in 24 hours, and I'm not even exaggerating. I had to write it down. I've never been as sleep deprived taking care of my children as I was taking care of my mum. And it was such an honour and a blessing to be able to give her that care. And at that point, my husband had already died. And so I had 6 pairs of eyes watching me take care of the one parent I had left. And if my children have learned anything from watching me, I hope that that's how Nana liked her cup of tea and what time she liked her coffee and out of which cup. That all of those things were more important than whether they knew their times tables.
That's very touching. Sorry, I want to cry. That touched me. Yes.
It's very true.
Sorry. I actually totally relate to it.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Sometimes we need. Sometimes.
No. Sorry. Yeah.
Sometimes we need to cry, because how we care for each other, our world of 8 or 9 billion humans, however many people, God knows how many.
Yes.
He knows how many hairs you have in your head, so he knows how many people are on this planet. You know, if we all took the time to care for each other, we'd also learn physics and math and engineering, and maybe sending rockets to the moon, though I'm not sure that actually cares for anyone on the planet.
Yeah, but caring.
Discuss.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? The most important, who is vulnerable? Who needs care now? And there were times, when various things happened. Either I had a physical illness or we had just been bereaved or something. And I would try to be great with my children and say to them, very honest, I'm exhausted, I'm sad, this is as much as I can do today. And then it was a case of, well, who's learned to drive in the house? Who has insurance on the car? Who can take my bank card and get money out and do a shopping? Or do we get a home delivery service? Do we ask a cousin or a
Yeah.
friend down the road? Do you know, I can remember after my
Yeah.
died, which was very sudden, he phoned Care Doc himself and he was dead within 12
So
minutes.
sorry to hear that.
And I can remember a friend coming from France. Thank you. One of my sons had to get home from France and one of them had to get home from America. So we were sending people to the airport, asking them, will you pick up so-and-so, whatever. It was a very difficult time. And one of my said that his friend had to get back to France at a certain time for a flight. And he could see I was exhausted of me to do it. And he was saying that his friend, who had made a huge effort to be here to support him for the funeral, would just get a bus locally and then it's an hour and a half to the airport. And I just held up my phone and I said, I have 20 people here who've said, if I can do anything for you, let me know. This is a time for us not to be independent. This is a time for us to realize none of us are self-sufficient. I don't like the idea that we're trying to raise self-sufficient. I think we are all interdependent. I think we need to watch out for each other. And I think we all need to care for each other. So I had a friend, was happy at 1 o'clock in the morning, airport run. And she has probably forgotten about that favor. But, you know, I think, yes, our children need to learn how to take care of themselves. They need to learn to watch who needs care around them, whether that's part of their family or somebody who is part of God's family but a stranger to them. And they also need to know that it's okay to ask for help. And it's not a character flaw to need help from another human being.
I like what you said there because that really touched me because, like over 2 years ago when my husband first diagnosed with, they call it a CKD, so he was on stage 5. And when I called the ambulance because he wasn't well, so from there to bringing him to the Conley Hospital, and then at that time transferred to Mater Hospital. It was, so totally like what you said there, your schedule changes. Of course, that's not the main priority, your homeschooling. That I can see how my children supported. At that time, my oldest was like 11 years old, even going to 12, you know what I mean? But she was really like into she already knows she's the one looking after the wee ones. So she was the one looking after the wee ones. And I just had a baby at that time, but she was like, "That's okay, mom. You can go to the hospital. I look after the children here." And everyone knows what their responsibility is, that you need to help each other. They can still read their books, you know what I mean? But it's not like we have this timetable you have to, follow it. So, but you can see there that the caring is there. So we have friends that help us because you need help. Like what you said there, you can't be just like, so the Bible even says, bear ye one another's burden. So you can't say that you can do it all because we need each other to help us. So then you can see there the people that really cares for you and your family, that really loves you and your family, that they're willing to extend a helping hand if they are offering that, to take that help because you need it too. Yes.
It's so important and 100%. And we're absolutely. And I'm so sorry that your family are still going through dealing with your husband's illness. It must be so difficult. But I do think those strong family bonds, if people, what I'm so grateful for is that there are 6 beautiful human beings. Now, I also lost babies. I had miscarriages. And then there were people who would just come to the door with a card or a flower or a lasagna, and they would just leave it and they would go away because they didn't want to talk to me or they didn't know if I wanted to talk to them. They weren't sure if the small children knew about their sibling not make. And so it's so important. And I would be blessed to have in the extended family, like even my husband's brother, he went and just cooked, and he was never taught by his mother to cook. He was taught by his wife, and he made a huge pot of food, came over, wasn't able to say anything about, I'm sorry about the baby or whatever, but just he brought us food. And those are the kind gestures that you will always remember. And you hope that that is
Mm.
imprinted then on your children's idea of how to
Yeah.
be a community for each other. And when we think about Jesus, who obviously was able to cope with anything, and
Yeah.
that there were women who ministered to him and who followed along with the disciples and on the teaching journeys and made sure that someone had remembered to get oil for the lamp and,
Yes.
make bread and make sure that there
Yes.
was somewhere for people to sleep. Because we need somebody to keep the scaffolding home life going. And it's not always your job as a mum. Sometimes your job is to almost make yourself dispensable. So I think it's important. I was having this conversation with a friend of mine who reared 4 children on her own, and we were talking about how important it is that in a family where so in our house at the moment we have a cow and a calf and a goat, and the goat needs to be milked. And then I wanted to go to a funeral. So in a very rushed way, I taught my children to milk the goat because I'd take wasn't something up with. We're only milking the goat for the last couple of years. It's not something they saw as children. Um, but how important it is that there isn't only one person in the house who does the same job. Although obviously it's easier if one person always empties the compost and one person makes sure
Yeah.
that there's a toilet roll and one person it, that some food is taken out of the freezer if we're going to reheat or cook something frozen, whatever. But that people can slot in and that it's actually that you've thought in your head, well, if the worst happens and if I have to go and take care of someone who's had an accident or if I'm away for 48 hours, how will they survive without me? And the good news is that the investment of your time, not that that's
Yeah.
what I was thinking about at the time. I wasn't thinking about not putting a school
Yeah.
uniform on a 4-year-old as I wanted them to learn how to cook scones so that if somebody turned up unannounced, there would be something fresh,
Yeah.
homemade in 20 minutes,
Yes.
while the coffee and the tea are brewing. It wasn't about that, but that was the lovely fruit. That was the lovely fruit of my investment of my adult life in my
That's
children.
beautiful. Beautiful. So I can totally relate to that. So there's like a long topic. This actually gave Monica loads of questions, moms, and I really would love her to share more. But because our time is really like limited, I think we're gonna have part two and part three of this. So thanks for sharing that, Monica, because that is so important. Like when you have like freshly made food for someone that's coming in, and if they're not used to that, that's like as well, wow, that is fantastic. So it's like sometimes when someone comes to us and I would say the children, come on, let's make some muffin because we have some visitor today,
Yeah.
that's coming. Let's make muffin and cookies. So at least we have something for tea party. And then when someone
Yeah.
comes, they appreciate it. Wow, you've made this, guys. Yeah, we did, So I know sometimes it's hard to do all fresh, if there's situation in the home, but then if that's possible to be done, it's like a blessing to someone that will receive it. It's a sweet treat. It's a lovely sweet treat to them too. I think I'm gonna ask Monica before,
It
so
is.
if
It is. And it shows you
yeah,
care. It's all
it
about
is that they
care.
feel
Yeah.
special for for them having freshly made things. So, Monica, you have already grown up children. How did your children prepare for college entry? So this, I'd like you if you can share that. Did they sit on Living Cert or did they apply? Did they do
Okay.
PLC courses or yeah,
Sure.
share to us please if it's that's okay.
So the so the eldest two, Dara is 38 and Oisin is 31. They decided when they were almost 13 to go into secondary school. And they did first year and then they came out. And so I've never
Hmm.
made a child do the junior cert. I think the junior cert, for people not watching in Ireland, the junior certificate is an exam that most Irish young people do at the age of 15. It qualifies you for nothing. Who hope junior cert might help their young person to get an apprenticeship to be an electrician. Useless. I think it's a complete waste of time and energy, and I feel sorry for any young person who's put through that. So none of my six have sat that exam at 15. And guess what? It didn't disadvantage them. The next two, so the first two then decided to do a leaving certificate. And that's the exam that Irish students take when they're 17 or 18. and it's used as the basis for college applications. And as it turns out, neither of them went on to do degrees. So, and that's not a reflection,
Mm.
a poor reflection on them or a poor reflection on them doing the Leaving Cert. It's just the way it happened. And the next one then at 16 was accepted to a local college 10 miles from us and did a 1 year course that is the equivalent of the Leaving Certificate and was accepted to do a degree in music. And he has a degree in piano with composition for 4 years in Dublin. The next one at 16 did that same year. He plays trombone and he was accepted to Cork School of Music and he did a degree in music with trombone and he is 20 next Monday and he leads community choirs, he plays in orchestras, he plays in wedding bands, he plays in kind of music, but he also conducts
Okay.
choirs, including my community choir. And so that's the fourth boy. Then my only girl will be 22 tomorrow. And she is going into fourth year of her music degree with flute. And again, she did the 1 year at age 16. Now, she was much more organised than her brothers. And she filled
Yeah.
in the application form when she was still 15. And we had the unusual experience of the vice principal of the college ringing us saying, she's only 15. The computer shouldn't have accepted her age and shouldn't have let her. She has an August birthday, so she was starting in September, which is exactly the
Yeah.
same age as her previous brother, because his birthday is 4 days after her in August. So it actually looked like they were possibly going to refuse my daughter to do the same course that her brothers had done at the
Yes.
exact same age, based on her being female. So one of her siblings said to me, you really need this as an equality issue if they refuse her the place. And we were very blessed again that the local principal of that Institute for Further
Yeah.
Education, which a lot of Irish towns have these colleges, and those courses are not always, not every principal will think that a 16-year-old is mature enough. But if they have met one home educated young person, then they generally will maybe, ease that requirement. A lot of colleges prefer people to be 18 now just for parental, local parentals kind of reasons. And I guess childhood has become longer in that now you have people in their 20s still living with their parents. That's not a bad thing, by the way, but living with their parents and because they can't cope out
Yeah.
as an independent adult, which is sad. So that was so she at 16 did the course in the local college, going into fourth year now of her degree, with flute and voice and piano. And then the young plays clarinet. He's been in the National Youth Orchestra and he is going to do a degree in Dublin with clarinet. He's starting in September. So the last five are all musicians and would, the one who did his Leaving Cert, he would teach guitar. I guess for a long time, a lot of his income would have been from teaching other students. He works in London now and he works in a coffee shop a couple of days a week because it's very hard as a musician who composes your own work it takes time. And all our children, I suppose, suffered from that, whatever you want to call it, 2-3
Yeah.
year lockdown where music wasn't accessible, chance to hone their skills and get known. So so 5 out of 6 are musicians, and the eldest has lived in America since he has an American passport, and he has lived in Hawaii since he was 21 for 10 years, in Colorado and in Montana. He says best place on earth because you have the sun in the summer and you can play tennis and golf, and he does jiu-jitsu. He works in the hospitality industry, and in the winter in Montana you can snowboard, which he says is the best kind of
Thank you very
exhilaration
much for
you will
sharing
ever
that,
feel.
Monica, because that's one of the questions that I always hear from moms that actually comes to me. How would they go to college? You know, can they go to college? I have one mom and she asked me, how can my daughter, she wants to be a doctor, can she be a doctor if she's homeschooled? So, and these are like the questions.
Yes, and it's very, very possible. And Yeah, there are so many routes, is what I say to people, and I find it sad that we would mortgage our children's childhood and send them at 3 and 4 to be with who will never love them as much as we will, who will never be able to give them the uh, opportunities to develop and progress that a loving mum or dad will. And we think that that's better because at 27 they might want to
I
graduate with a
love that.
medical degree. I think it's most important that we don't think that our adult time is important. I think the ability. There was a fantastic book I was lucky enough to read and meet the author, Naomi Stadlin. She's a lovely English lady, and she wrote a book called "What Mothers Do, Especially When It Looks Like Nothing." And it's a beautiful book, and she describes beautifully how you in your head are thinking, gosh, I have to pay the electricity bill, or I have to write my shopping list, or I really need to, I don't know, paint my toenails, whatever. You've got something in your head as the mum you really want to do. And your 4-year-old comes up and says, why does it look like the moon is following us when we drive at night? So that's your choice then. That's the existential question. That's, I think, the little nudge on your shoulder from hopefully your well-formed conscience. This is the time when this child would like me to explain something. I don't need to know everything. I don't need to know
Yes.
anything. I need to know where to find the information. And I need to be calm enough in myself to put what I want to do on hold to say, this child has a need right now. Let's go with this. And I think that is the secret to home education. And what Naomi Stadlin calls it is being instantly
I love that word.
interruptible.
Yeah. Mm.
And she has 2 more beautiful books called How Mothers Love and What Mothers Learn. And she ran mothering circles in London for years where women spoke about their experience of being, and she's a psychotherapist, and she took her training and she married that, we'll say, to the experience, the real life lived experience of mums saying, this is what I'm going through. And I do realize that it is a blessing to be able to be at home with your children. And I know that many mums who would like to home educate and dads who would like to home educate realize that it's very difficult on one income to be able to do that. It's very difficult to have a mum or dad at home with children. But I know families, Evelyn, who are doing what looks to me like heroic work to do this. They are driving cars that are at least 9 or 10 years old. They are not taking foreign family holidays. They are showing with every financial choice they make in their family that mum or dad being at home with little people is the most important investment in their future. Not having a savings account so we can
Beautiful.
send them to
I
Harvard.
love that. So it is a decision that we have to make, so if that is really something that we want to do, what can I say, Monica, to those moms that are thinking, can they homeschool, and they have this fear that's stopping them? What advice can you give them?
I would say when we come down to choices in our life, generally we have the choice of compassion and kindness, or we have the other driver of a lot of our decisions is fear. And that's very biologically based. As beings, I think we are gifted, particularly as new mothers, we are gifted with not an immune system, sort of a nervous system that is on the alert, scanning all the time. Are there wolves or bears or foxes or dangerous people around who are going to hurt our precious little ones? And no matter what, to be a teacher. And the home educating parents that I know who are trained teachers, their teaching qualification was sometimes a hurdle, an obstacle to them home educate children. They had, so as far as I can see, and I was married for 20 years to a secondary school teacher, what school is about, what teaching teachers is about, is not so much knowledge transmission. Remember, we spoke about how our problem is
Mm-hmm.
not that there's any lack of knowledge in
Yes.
today's world. Our problem
Yes.
is how to discern what's the important information. And so I would suggest that the only qualification to be a good home educating mum or dad is, do you love your children? That's all you need. Because then you don't need expensive curriculum. We didn't use it. We got curriculum sometimes gifted to us by frustrated parents of school going children who said, I paid X amount of money for these workbooks and here we are in June and they're not filled in. Would your child like them? A lot of what's sold as curriculum is not necessary and is not helpful for the development of young people. Basically, if you get the start right, which is to say, you're a small, vulnerable person, I love you, I will protect you. And if you find in your circle, and sadly, a lot of us won't find it from our parents. My parents absolutely got home education and never told me that it was a problem, that I might be
Mm-hmm.
disadvantaging my children. That was not the case on my husband's side of the family. Will be very blessed if you have one neighbor or one friend who lives within a 20-minute drive of you, who is a house where you can go and have a cup of tea or coffee and say, I'm really having my 12-year-old who used to love reading doesn't anymore. I'm scared I'm messing up. So I would say hand your fears over to the God who gave you
Yeah.
those children. God
Amen.
wasn't messing up when he made you that child's mum or dad. So my experience is, because I have home educated I lived on the Aran Islands for nearly a year. I lived in Limerick City. I lived in Dublin City. I lived in rural Kilkenny. I lived in a small village in Meath. I live in the countryside in Tullow. I home educated when I had one child and he was an only child for 7 years. I've home educated when I had 6 children. I've home educated when I had a child with a diagnosis. I've home educated when I didn't have a car, when I couldn't get to get-togethers, when I had friends who were on the other side of the country or on the other side of the world or a phone call away, and maybe I didn't have a landline and maybe I didn't have a mobile. You'll always find an excuse for not doing it. But if you would like to find the courage to be with your children on their learning journey, I promise you will not regret it. It will be the best investment in a beautiful family who will love and mind each other and care for each other and care for you when you're vulnerable, because that's what it's all about at the end of the day. Our children, we can preach to them. We can tell them they should be kind to older people and younger people and vulnerable people and people in wheelchairs and people who can't speak and people who are blind. We can talk about that. But it's when we show them that even if I really wanted a bath or a shower on my own and the baby wakes up, I'm going to pick up the baby. I'm going to love the person who is sad. And when we show that as our priority, then we're also investing in our own
Yes.
elderly age, if you know what I mean. If we're lucky enough to get 7 or 8 decades before we get a little bit decrepit and
That's
needing a
beautiful.
little bit
Thanks
more
for
time.
sharing that, Monica, because that is so true what you said there. We as parents, no one can love your child like you do, moms. That's the only qualification. Let me say that properly. Qualification that you would need. Because if you love your children, you will fight for them, you will protect them, and you will do things that sometimes you can't even imagine you were able to do. So you don't need to know everything about homeschooling. But if you have that passion and God gave you that burden to homeschool your children. That is your calling to train them, while they are young. It's going to be a blessing because my oldest at the moment is just going to be 15 in few days. And it's already a blessing, I can say. And all my children, wherever we go, they can notice the difference in my children's lives because not because I am perfect, not because I'm fantastic, but because we work together. We work together. We're all working together as a family. We do things together. If we're going to swim, we swim as a family. If we're going to go hiking, we hike as a family. Everything we do is a family thing. So that is thank you for sharing that, Monica. And Monica, we end this podcast. Where can they find you? Let's say if they want to know more about you or your channel, do you want to share that to the listeners today as well, if you can, please?
Thanks so much, Evelyn. I have a YouTube channel under my own name, Monica O'Connor, and I have interviewed 16 Irish young adults, mostly unschooled. That means mostly learned at home with mum and or without a curriculum. And they've shared with me how they got to college and to meaningful work. And so that's under my name, Monica O'Connor, on YouTube. On Facebook, my family have a page called Home Education Support, and that's Home Education Support. And about, oh gosh, how many years? 13 years ago, a student was making a documentary for his university degree. He came to interview our family, and our then 11-year-old, he was looking for teenagers to talk about home education, and the 16-year-old was in college at the time. So the 11-year-old is the star of it. It's a 16-minute documentary. It's called Homegrown Knowledge, and you will see the younger children when they are aged 4 and 11 and 16, and they're just speaking about what to do. And I, under my own name as well, I also have oh my goodness, a
Yeah.
WordPress. Now I haven't been good recently. I put one up last month, I think, and then not for several years. But yeah, and I am the County Carlow contact for the Home Education Network. So anyone who wants to ask me about how to go about something, I don't know all the answers, but I generally am good about connecting people with someone who can help them. And a lot of people whose children, because of undiagnosed special educational needs or because the school environment just doesn't suit them, I take a lot of calls from parents in those situations. And really a lot of it is just listening to people talk about their frustration and the difficulties they're having. And just they need to know that home education is not going to disadvantage their children. And in one word, it doesn't. But your child may need some time if they've had a stressful time in school. If your family is just coming to the idea, if you're not home educating from birth, your child may need some time to de-stress from school before they are happy to look at a book or something that looks like learning without feeling very panicked or anxious.
Thanks for sharing that, Monica. I will try to get those links from Monica, moms, and I will put it in the show notes. So you can click it and you can go website to her blog and to her YouTube channel. And I just want to let you know, moms, that there's help out there. So if you're thinking of homeschooling, but there's fears that's stopping you, I also have a free guide that I made, the 3 top fears that's stopping you from homeschooling. So it's a free guide. I'll put the link in the show notes as well. So you can download that. And I pray that will encourage you. And if you need further help, just contact us and we'll do our best to help you the best we can. And you can also go to my website, www.christianhomeschoolmama.com. And thank you, moms, again today. So if this episode is a blessing to you, please like and subscribe. Leave a comment because we would love to get connected. So if you have any question, we will do our best to answer those questions. So leave a comment. And if it's a blessing to you, share it to other moms that might find it a blessing as well. So that we would really appreciate that because at the moment we want to have a community of homeschooling family to be more to be more encouraging just to have a bigger community just to help each other out. Yeah. So again, Monica, thank you for your time today. I'll end this podcast with a prayer and we'll say goodbye to each other. So thank you, Lord, for this opportunity. Thank you, Lord, for Monica for sharing her story, for the encouragement that she gave to each mom. And I just pray to you, Jesus, that you will encourage every mom that's homeschooling. And if they're thinking of homeschooling, Lord, you will give them the strength they need each day to love their children, to help each other out, and to be a blessing, Lord. Help each moms today, Lord, in their duties, because we know, Lord, motherhood is a challenging role. But with you, Lord, is strengthening us. We can do this because we have you, Jesus. thank you, Lord Jesus, today. In your name we pray. Amen. Well, Monica, thanks again for your time. And to everyone that's
Amen.
listening today, thank you. And Lord willing, we'll see you next week. God bless. Bye bye. Thank you.
Take care.